It's another Football Friday OSU edition. I'm Jenni Carlson here with part of our OSU coverage team. I'm here in the studio with Barry Tramel, columnist, and joining us on the phone is John Helsley, OSU beat writer. We're going to be talking about OSU's game Saturday against Texas Tech, all things Cowboys. That's a 2:30 kickoff, by the way, up in Stillwater, the last home game of the season for the Cowboys. And John, that means it's senior day. Let's reflect a little bit on this class for a minute. As you think about it, John, what stands out to you about this group of seniors?
Well, it's a little bit like Mike Gundy said in his press conference on Monday. I think it's a class that's been very successful. You know, was able to continue to go to bowl games. They'll have been, you know, the 4-year guys will have been to 4 bowl games and possibly 5 if they redshirted and made the trip. So I think that's always impressive. They've been able to really extend this period of success in the program.
Yeah, it definitely is hard to believe anymore. Bowl games are just almost a certainty, Barry. And when you think about it, it's got to be a continuation of good recruiting classes and development of these guys. What for you stands out about the group that they'll have departing? Anything in particular?
Well, I think about really solid players. Guys that really OSU can't play without anymore. Maybe not All-Americans, maybe not even make all Big 12, but just really good football players, people like Jordan Stearns and people like that, that have really gone through the fire and been good players. And, Jordan Burton's a JUCO guy, but same caliber. It's actually a fairly young offense, so you're seeing more seniors over there on the defensive side. But it's a place where, like the tailbacks, for instance. Chris Carson's a senior. Guys that, have been really good contributors. Sometimes we forget how far this OSU football program has come. And you don't build that kind of success without just a foundation of rock-solid guys and rock-solid football players.
They've actually got a fairly decent amount of guys that have either been, as you mentioned, like a Jordan Burton, junior college transfers, Devontae Averett. You've got Victor Saleko, who came in from UAB after their program was shut down there for a minute. So, and then guys like Zach Veach. You also saw Blake Jarwin in that senior group. But, obviously the news this week, John, that one of those seniors is going to be coming back, and Marcell Ateman getting a redshirt year after this year of injury. How significant a news in your mind is that Marcell Ateman will be a Cowboy again next year?
Well, it's major because you're talking about a guy that was, projected to be the number 2 receiver this year behind James Washington. And, should James decide to go to the NFL, then you've got a ready-made number 1 in Ateman. And it looks like a very good receiving group next year. You've got Teron Johnson, the LSU transfer. If Washington comes back, Ateman, Jelly McCleskey's become a big-time player for them. And they've got some young receivers they like and some in this recruiting class. So you're really adding a premium piece to the offense and a big play wide receiver.
Yeah, because in this senior class, you only lose Austin Hayes and Jawan Seals. 2 guys that have been good receivers, but if you bring back James Washington and that receiver core, Barry, I guess there might be some places around the country that could say they got better receivers, but I can't think of too many.
No, that's the strength of this team, the pitch and catch game between Rudolph and those receivers. And the good thing for the recruiting is they do have some veterans. They have seniors, guys that aren't coming back, but they got guys apparently ready to replace them. And Chopper mentioned McCleskey as an example of a playmaker, a guy that's really come on. Ateman being back is a huge blessing. So, they've got that position really fortified. And they've done the same thing on the defensive line where they've gotten really solid and really deep. So they've just built up the position by position. And, Cowboys have this is the 4th time in 6 years that Oklahoma State has either won the Big 12 or challenged for the Big 12. So, that's what you'd expect out of an elite program, and that's what Oklahoma State's become in the Big 12.
As we talk about senior day, the senior class, wide receivers, pitch and catch, sort of feel like we're almost biting around the edges of the big question of, will the pitcher be back? Will Mason Rudolph be back? Will James Washington be part of that receiver core? And that's a question sort of that's looming more and more as, this could be their last game in Stillwater for the Cowboys. So a two-part question, John. Will they be back? Should they come back? Two separate things, but I don't know if we can answer the will because we haven't really heard anything definitive. But what are your thoughts about these two and whether they will be back or whether they should be back next year?
You know, one of the things we always fall into during the season as we see players have good years and they, you know, guys that have been around and have had good careers also, is we always want to send them out the door early. And, you know, at OSU, that really hasn't happened a lot. Guys have stuck around. Mike Gundy made the point Monday, and I thought it was a really good point on just how good you have to be to go play in the NFL. And they throw the ball in super tight windows. The players are so big and so fast. And, you know, a lot of it just comes down to, are you going to be a first-round draft pick, right? And, you know, are you ready physically to go do that? And I don't know about these two guys. I mean, yeah, you watch them and you think, hey, they're really good. Big 12 quarterbacks have not done well in the NFL. And I think NFL teams are starting to notice that, and they're taking note of that. And then you look at James Washington. He's an outside receiver at OSU. He's got to play inside in the NFL. What's that adjustment transition like? So there may be some real benefit for those two guys to come back, continue to work on their game, and see what happens then after their, you know, final senior season.
Yeah, and they've also seen maybe in recent years some guys that have left. I think about Josh Stewart. He pops to mind almost immediately, such a great receiver for the Cowboys, but then never gets off the ground with his NFL career. You know, so you wonder, you know, I think James Washington's a better talent than Josh Stewart, but it just speaks to the difficulty of these guys that leave early, Barry. You've long sort of had the belief that coming back, if there's a question, come back.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not really financial. You know, you hear coaches make the point and players make it on the other side about, you know, it's a financial decision. But to me, if you're enjoying the college experience, you probably ought to stay, because what you get in a senior year of college is something you can't buy. Doesn't matter how much money you make in the NFL. You can't go buy that final season of college football, the memories, the brotherhood, the experience. The closer you get to graduation, perhaps even get that diploma. To me, you know, that is greater than whatever financial gain you can make. If you're Adrian Peterson or Barry Sanders or somebody, yeah, go and, you know, go all the way to Canton. But for most of these guys, it's like Chopper said, it's a grind, it's a struggle. You'll probably make it if you're Mason Rudolph and James Washington, but it's nothing for sure. So, you know, playing that senior year of college in Stillwater, if you like it, you know, and not everybody does, but if you're enjoying the college experience, I'd milk it for all you can.
When I would assume that these guys have a chance to enjoy a especially special senior season if they come back in tandem, and then as we talked about, that wide receiver core that they bring back, you're bringing back Justice Hill in the run game. You've got an offensive line that loses some pieces but regains some guys, and, you know, a guy like Larry Williams, who's been hurt, he comes back. We've seen what a centerpiece he is. I mean, Barry, if those two come back, you've got to like OSU to make a ton of noise in 17.
Well, and the schedule turns for them. You know, in the odd number of years, the Cowboys typically have a good schedule. They get Bedlam in Stillwater, and they get Baylor and TCU in Stillwater, and they still have to go to Tech and Austin, but they've been winning in those places. So 17 would be a really interesting year if they have their quarterback.
Yeah, I feel remiss to not talk about, as we're talking about these wide receivers, John, at least a nod towards what we might see Saturday afternoon up in Stillwater as Texas Tech comes to town, a Tech defense that has struggled mightily. We've seen them give up a ton of yards to a lot of different teams. What do you expect? Do you expect an aerial show by the Cowboys, or is this a case of maybe a more of a ground game? What do you expect to see OSU's offense against that Tech defense?
Golly, when you look at Tech's defensive numbers, you think OSU might just be able to do whatever it wants to do. You know, Tech's not very good on either way, either defending the pass or the run. They're last in the Big 12 in rushing defense, last in total defense, way down there in scoring defense. this might be a fun day for the OSU offense as long as they play clean football and don't get penalties and don't turn it over. They should be able to run the ball well, and they can seemingly always throw the ball well. So it shapes up as a really good day for the offense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just how many points these two teams do combine for. Before we get to the question of what Tech might score, let me remind folks this is Football Friday, the OSU edition. And John, let's stick with you and talk about the OSU defense because we've seen struggles out of the OSU defense, but clearly has this team in a position, as Barry said, to contend for the Big 12 championship. But with this stretch run, when you're looking at Tech and their offensive prowess, then you look at TCU next week, then Bedlam finish. Is there any chance that the Cowboys are potentially looking at a repeat of last year where they faded so bad late? Is that going to happen, or are some scenarios set up different that could be a different outcome?
I think it won't be that bad. There were some things that happened a year ago. Obviously, injuries played a part in that, and I think fatigue played a big part in that. They've been much better about substituting this season, especially up front. Now, they lost Billy Lavini last week, so that takes a key depth piece out of the front line. As long as they stay healthy, I think they've done a very good job of trying to keep guys fresh and utilizing more players to where it shouldn't be as bad as it was a year ago. Saturday, I don't know what to expect necessarily because Texas Tech's pretty good on offense. Patrick Mahomes is a big-time quarterback, and he's the style of quarterback that's given the Cowboys problems. A guy that's mobile and can do some things with his legs, and obviously he throws the ball well. But I don't think that we're going to see anything quite as drastic as it was a year ago when they really just faltered at the finish.
Well, and Barry, John brings up a great point about the substitutions that OSU's done. Glenn Spencer talked about this before the season started, that they were just going to have to put guys in there sometimes that weren't their top-level guys, weren't their starters, to build for this time of the year. We've seen it from time to time. Lineups out there that you're wondering, now who's out there? Why are they out there? Well, they're out there for these games. Do you think this is set up differently for the Cowboy defense?
No, they'll probably get lit up. That's what Tech does. They light up some pretty good defenses from time to time. Tech's problem is that I don't think the Tech defense has any chance of stopping OSU. Yeah. The last 5 years, Oklahoma State has averaged 58 points a game against Texas Tech. And this OSU offense is, I would say, the second best offense of the Mike Gundy era, or at least the last 5-6 years. They're running the ball well. Rudolph's got a ton of receivers to throw to. They can go deep. They can go short. They can run the ball. Tech's in big trouble. Tech is going to have to get into the 50s to win this game. I don't think Tech will get that high.
Well, if we're saying that OSU's just going to have too much offensive firepower against Tech, I think we might be able to say something similar about TCU, even though Gary Patterson, known for building good defenses, they're not on the level that they have been in the past, which brings us to the Bedlam game. If we're saying that OSU is going to have the firepower to win these next two, that brings us to Bedlam. And, John, it seems to me like that could be the game that decides the Big 12, and I think a lot of people are wondering, could one of those teams potentially sneak into the college football playoff? Chances are low. I think OU's seen with a little better chance, but maybe not by a ton. How does that play out in your mind as you look ahead?
Well, I just think the Big 12 is in a bad position. I don't think there's a ton of respect across the college football voting for anybody from the Big 12. OU is always going to have a little bit more of a boost in that regard, but with two losses, unless some teams just, a lot of teams actually just fall apart here at the end, I think it's going to be hard for anybody from the Big 12 to jump up into the top four. But it will make for a fun Bedlam game, no doubt. If the Cowboys can get there and Oklahoma can continue to take care of business, that'd be great for the state and great for the two teams if they could go to Norman and play for the Big 12 championship. And, there's always going to be some good things dangling there for the winner.
It does seem like that there's a lot of variables that would have to fall right, Barry, for Bedlam to be a decider for the college football playoff. Not to say it won't decide the Big 12 champion, but that to have the winner of that game go to the playoff, what's the likelihood in your mind?
It's very small. Lots have to happen. First of all, the OU or OSU, one of those two has to win out, whichever one is going to win the Bedlam game, needs to win before they get to Bedlam. They've got some things going for them. Like Oklahoma State's got 2 losses, but in the committee room, you can argue Oklahoma State's got 1 loss. You can say the Central Michigan was a farce of a result because Central Michigan got to play after the game should have ended. Oklahoma's actually got they're a slot ahead right now than they were this time last year. Last year they were 12th this week. Eventually made it up to the number 4 spot. Actually made it up to the number 3 spot going into the Bedlam game. So it's happened before, but there's a lot of hurdles. It looks to me like the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten are going to get one team in. So what you got to try to pass the Pac-12, and you got to try to pass the runner-ups in those other leagues that Louisville, Michigan, those kind of people that want a seat at the table. Lots has to happen. Probably not going to happen. But I will say this, the statistical firm that I look at, 538, they love to put numbers on everything. They say OU's got an 8% chance right now of making the playoff. Well, at 5 o'clock Tuesday, they said Donald Trump had a 22% chance of winning. Not a big difference there. Trump won sort of going away. A couple things happen each week, and the Bedlam winner would have a shot.
Well, and John, Barry brings up this question of that Central Michigan game, and to this point, it sounds like that's not in the discussion in the committee room. I wonder if OSU keeps winning, do you think there's a point when OSU, Mike Gundy, his coordinators, the players that are out talking to the media, do we start to hear talk about that game, that it should have been a win, not a loss? Because if OSU's sitting, what would they be, 7-1 had that game been called correctly? They'd no doubt be higher in the rankings right now. Is there any point where you think we're going to start to hear a little bit of old school BCS time lobbying here by the Cowboys?
Well, it's sort of already begun. Mike Gundy keeps sort of forwarding that message, hinting at it. He's done that kind of subtly, sometimes not so subtly. But the fact that the Cowboys moved to 13th in the latest college football poll, playoff poll, I think it's in people's minds whether they're saying it or not, because they haven't done that much in the last couple of weeks to suddenly put themselves on some great radar. So I think it's if it's not coming out of people's mouths, I think it's at least in their heads that game was Central Michigan. And I think if somehow Oklahoma State would run the table, I don't know that it gets them into the top 4, but I think it becomes probably a point. Again, whether it comes out of anybody's mouth or not, I think it's in people's minds that, hey, they did get jobbed that Saturday.
Yeah, definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on. We will. Let's finish with predictions. Everybody on our staff picked OSU to win. John, we'll start with you. Tell us about your pick. You had OSU winning 52-35. And you're our leader. You're our leader, John, on our picks. So tell us about your pick.
Well, it's a little bit what Barry said. I just don't see how Texas Tech is gonna stop Oklahoma State, especially in Stillwater. I think they'll play a good, solid game. They'll pretty much do what they want to do, and they'll score a bunch of points. I think Tech makes enough mistakes to keep their score around 35. Maybe they get to 42 or so. I don't know, but I just think Oklahoma State's firepower and consistency is going to win out.
All right, Barry, you had a 20-point win by the Cowboys, 55-35. Just think too much firepower?
Well, when people ask me why so high, I would say why so low. 70-53 was the score last year, so I don't know that that's firepower when these two teams play. But I just think Tech's got no chance of stopping Oklahoma State. I mean, Texas ran wild on them. Oklahoma ran wild on them. Everybody, Cowboys are going to be able to run on this team. Tech can't stop the run at all. And I think you'll see the tailbacks have a big day. If they start gashing them there, you'll see the guys come up. There goes James Washington. There goes Juwan Seals. There goes Jalen McCleskey. So, you won't see many punts, but I think you'll see Tech punt more than Oklahoma State.
The only person on our staff to go over the 50-point mark was our man Kyle Fredrickson. He goes 62-45, but I went a little tighter than you guys did. I went OSU winning by a touchdown. I just think that, again, this is going to be a test. I have no doubt OSU is going to score a ton of points on these guys, but it's going to be a test for that OSU defense as well. We've seen them have their struggles, especially with the secondary. What are those guys going to do? Mahomes is really good. I don't think we can forget that. But it'll be interesting to see just how high scoring it does get, because I think it could. Scores in the 40s and the 50s. We might have undersold it. So, don't be looking at your watches. I think we're going over 4 hours. This game could have more hours in it than punts. How about that? You like that pick?
I hope not. I hope you're not still playing football at 6:40 on Saturday night.
I fear we may be. We'll see how it goes. Hey, thanks for joining us on Football Friday, the OSU edition, and be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.